Hello everyone and welcome to the Intimate Talks interview series. I'm Asi Efros and our special guest today is Jacci Jaye, a renowned fashion stylist who specializes in intimate apparel. Hi Jacci, so nice to have you with us today.
Hi Asi, nice to be here, thank you. And the stylist is the one that sits at the table and brings everybody together and collectively puts forth their vision in an image.
I know that you had an amazing career and you have begun your career as a fashion designer and a costume designer, and then you pivoted to becoming a stylist. So if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I started out in the traditional path. I went to school for fashion design and for theater, film, and television costume design. As I neared graduation, I realized a lot of my designs were intimate apparel based. And in particular, I really was inspired by the structural design of corsetry. And I tended to infuse that in everything that I did, from period costumes, stage costumes, to every type of design. So when I graduated, my dream was to be a Broadway costume designer. But in the meantime, when I graduated, I decided to launch a line of corsets. That line of corsets took off very quickly. I launched them in Los Angeles. They got a lot of press. They were featured in a lot of magazines. Celebrities started to reach out to me. And the more press that I got and the more that they were featured in magazines, I started to see that they weren't always being represented in the way that me as a designer wanted them represented. In particular, there was one shoot, one fashion editorial where the stylist styled the corset backwards with the lacing in the front. It's a stylist liberty, like that's what a stylist does. You use your creativity, but that's not, as a designer, that's not how I wanted it shown. So from there, that prompted me to say, you know what, I want a little more creative control. I want to be on set and I perhaps want to style the shoots. At the time, I hardly knew what a stylist was. I just know that I wasn't being represented as a designer, and as a new brand, that's so important. So I started styling the shoots, and actually fell in love with photography. And there's a lot of things about it that I had never been on set before. I had never been so close to the art before, but really loved it. And before I knew it, from that press that I got from those shoots, I started being reached out by other companies, and in particular, a lot of lingerie brands to style their campaigns. So without me looking for it, I became known as a stylist.
That's amazing.
They say one opportunity knocks and open the door. That's what I did. So then I started working with a lot of lingerie companies, but then also a lot of commercial campaigns like financial institutions, pharmaceutical companies, which you wouldn't think as a stylist that now has a lingerie portfolio. But it's an industry that is all about who you know. So if a photographer I worked with styled, say, a lingerie campaign, and then the next week was styling a pharmaceutical, he would call me. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door in that way. So then I still was styling shows and movies and what have you. And in between the big jobs, because movies and shows take 6 months to a couple years, I was styling campaigns. And just as time went on, realized, you know what, this is where I belong. This is what I want to focus on. So my everything kind of shifted, and I've been a stylist now for 22 years.
Oh my God, that's a fairy tale journey story. Oh my God.
I would never even imagine that even existed, honestly. I did not know what a stylist was.
So what does a stylist do?
A stylist does a lot of things, but basically they work with it depending on the type of campaign. So if it's an advertising campaign, a fashion editorial, if it's e-commerce, you're working with the creative and marketing teams of a company to basically bring their brand vision to life. So a designer designs the collection, or they design, say, a piece, they need a stylist to put it together and define who is wearing that and bring it into a world. So say it's a lingerie company, it would be the stylist job to now put the whole vision together and pull the right shoes and the right jewelry and maybe the right handbag and have her laying on a couch with the right throw pillows and kind of put that whole, it's like kind of like a painter has a canvas as their form of art, and a stylist, the model is their canvas, and anything visually in the shop is the canvas.
Wonderful. So why do brands need a stylist in for their marketing campaigns? Because I love images. Images, I feel like I feel more of a story even than the text is, the writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, and I'm very sensitive to images. You know, are they good? Are they bad? Do they tell the right story? Do they not? So, how do you affect the images in your work? How do you make them better and stand out?
Well, it's funny, you said, because I appreciate photography, and photography is the one medium, unlike when I was designing for stage or movies, and things go by in a flash. I can spend months creating the perfect outfit, and it has 2 seconds of screen time, and we don't get to see the imperfections. We see it, we appreciate it, and then we move on, and we're visually stimulated by a million other things. In a photograph, that lives on forever, in every little detail, and every detail is scrutinized, like under a microscope. And everybody has an opinion, so it's very subjective. But I think a stylist is the person. So in a company, there's a lot of people with opinions. There's the creatives, there's the marketing team, the designers, and the stylist is the one that sits at the table and brings everybody together and collectively puts forth their vision in an image, and makes it, I guess, cohesive. A lot of times stylists work off of storyboards. So a design team might put together a board, and it's very, very loose. It's more of a feeling. They don't know what the specifics are in that shot. They just know the vibe or the feeling. And the stylist is going to be the one that goes in, okay, I get that, the feeling of luxury, or the feeling of everything being really plush and moody. These are the things that we need to create the feeling, like the exact things. These are the exact earrings and the exact throw pillows and the exact, socks or whatever it is. So you need that person that's actually going to make the magic that everybody else has in their head come to life.
Magic is the right word. I feel like, yes, photo shoots are made of magic.
Yeah, it's all about pulling a rabbit out of a hat and creating it's all an illusion.
Exactly. Interesting. So does your design experience help you in the process?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like as a stylist, having the resource because everything is always a scavenger hunt as a stylist. The client always wants a million things, and they want it right now. And typically it's not the right season for those things. So it becomes a very serious scavenger hunt with no time to do it. So in addition to being able to pull the rabbit out of the hat and find the things, being able to create the things and know how design-wise to create the things and know how to speak to tailors or sample makers because there's no time, there's no room for error, there's no time for back and forth. So you need to tell them exactly what you want. And a lot of times I can create the first pattern as a designer, which is really helpful. It saves time and it saves money. We're always up against budgets. And then the other reason it's helpful is when we're on set and a company gives me things to shoot, mainly if we're shooting like e-commerce, it's never the right size that I need. It's always like 2 sizes too big or 1 size too small, or it never ever fits perfectly. And a stylist job is to make it look like it was tailor-made for that model. So at my design background, I know how to create that illusion, which seams to pinch in, which fake darts to make and put where to make it look like it was tailor-made. if you were to ask any model on set to spin around, there's always a whole series of clamps and pins and maybe fishing line up the back. So as a designer, it helps me to manipulate fabrics in that way.
Oh, wonderful. That's so interesting. I never actually thought of that. I probably never had artists on my set. That's why.
You're very lucky.
I'm sorry,
I'm
stylist. Right.
very lucky.
So what do you like the most about photo shoots? I know you mentioned magic already, and it is magical because it's always, I feel like you steer this big ship of people's opinions, right?
Lots of
into
opinions.
into one photograph.
Yeah.
So what do you like the most about it?
I think one of my favorite things, in coming from a world where I started working in theater and I started working on movies, those are very, very big teams, and they're not intimate. You're talking, dozens, if not hundreds of people on a movie set. And then you get to a photo shoot and you have a core group of 5 or 6 people. So you kind of work together like a family. You're a small, close-knit team. And you also have to kind of be like dance partners, because you're working in the same 5-foot space. And if I go left, you need to go right. It's you need to be in sync with your team. And I think that's really beautiful when you find people that you can work so closely with and that can push you, I guess, stylistically or visually, or kind of push your boundaries of what you thought you wanted to create. And you might be fighting for something, and then because you trust your team so much and they're like, no, Jackie, you're wrong, we need to do it this way. And being a photograph and being every click, we've now created a new piece of art. We can very quickly try all those ideas, and you can't do that in any other medium. But it takes us 2 seconds to step in and, let's tweak the light. Let me swap out those shoes. Let me swap that necklace. Let me change that sofa to this other chair. Let's change the model pose. So I like the collaboration and the closeness to the art.
Wow, amazing! And it keeps like kind of the artist and art keeps coming up these words, but it is art. It is art. And so, what is the most difficult thing about your role, and what is the most enjoyable?
There's a lot of both. I feel like this is definitely an industry where you need thick skin. There's a lot of very strong personalities. Everybody's got an opinion. It's all subjective. A lot of times there's no right or wrong answer. And you need to be so confident in your opinion that you need to fight for it. And know when to step back and let somebody else, if they happen at the end of the day, their idea is better, but you need to go in with a very, very strong opinion, and not take offense to anything, because at the end of the day, this is all about the client. It's about the image. It's not personal. If I feel like the black shoes are appropriate and somebody else feels like the nude shoes are appropriate, we can fight about it for 10 minutes. At the end of the day, that's not personal. If I lose that battle, like if that looks better, amazing. So I think having thick skin in working with very strong personalities is tough. And I think also it's an industry where everything needs to happen right now or yesterday. So we never have enough time to do what we want to do. So being forced to make sacrifices that we don't want to make, and being able to change on a dime is really difficult. A lot of times it creates more magic when you're forced to do that. But I think if you were to ask anybody in this world, they'd be like, oh my God, I wish I had a few more hours or days or weeks to create this, and plan and not have everything feel so rushed. So I would say those are the toughest things. In addition to, I'll throw one more thing out there. There's a lot of very early mornings.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of my alarm clock at 4 in the morning. And then, the things I love. I work with people that I love. I get to travel all over the world. I get to create beautiful things. There's a lot to love about it. and constantly be on the hunt for inspiration. I think is another beautiful thing, because as a stylist, you're the one infusing, I guess, putting everything together. So you need to always have fresh inspiration, which can be gotten from anywhere. So I live my life not to work necessarily, but it never stops. That never shuts off.
So you must love what you do,
I do.
right? So because you kind of love your life and you work there together. It only happens when someone just loves what they do.
It's true.
And probably
It's
good
true.
at it too, right?
But it's true. Yeah.
So what skills or qualities are the most important in your work?
I think you need to have a strong eye visually. I mean, you need to have style, and you need to be able to not just have style for yourself, but be able to overall look at style and know colors and themes and things for what's right for the client. Because a lot of people have style for themselves. That doesn't mean you can translate it to a style completely different than your own for a client. So I think you need to be very in tune visually and just have an eye. And I think that's something that, yes, you can go to school and you can hone, but I think you have to be born with a certain element of that. I also think the design background is helpful. Being a team player and being resilient is helpful, and having a level of hustle in you because it's so competitive. So you cannot just sit back and expect your phone to ring without putting in the work. And you need to know that every shoot, every job you're on could be your last if you decide to not, quote unquote, show up for the day. Because there's a million people behind you ready to take your job any second. So you need to be fully present every interaction you have, in every shoot you're on, every client you're with.
That's amazing. And
very
it's
important.
also, yes, oh my goodness. I'm glad you mentioned that, because fashion industry, as I remember it, it was very competitive and still is. So what advice would you give to someone who likes this career of a stylist and dreaming about becoming a stylist?
The biggest piece of advice is to network. It's all about who you know. I would start building a portfolio. I think every photographer wants things to shoot. And there's always people starting out where you're starting out. And so in the beginning, when I started to build my portfolio, every photographer wants a stylist to raise their hand and say, I'll style a shoot for you. And there's photographers can always get models that, again, can join the team, because models also always want images. So you think things are so unattainable, but there's people out there that want the same thing you do. They want to build a book. And they'd be very happy to have you step up to the plate and say, you'll take your part. And then a hair and makeup artist will raise their hand and say, oh my God, that's amazing. So I would start reaching out to people and putting those teams together. The number one person is a photographer. They're usually connected to the hair and makeup and the models. And then maybe separately start creating some storyboards of shoots that you would like to do. They could even be Pinterest boards, idea boards. That's when a photographer says, yes, I would love to shoot. Then the second thing is they're going to be like, well, do you have any ideas? And it's always better if they're your ideas, because you want to establish a voice. So if somebody's open to your ideas or your direction, of course, that would be the most ideal for you to already have some of those ideas to share, and then everybody else can kind of collaborate and hone in on it. And yeah, so I think networking is the biggest thing, and just building the book and hustling, and then also everybody. I know I'm always very overwhelmed and could use help. So if somebody said, Jackie, can I be your assistant or your intern or follow you around? I don't think many people are going to say no. And I think everybody works very differently. So it would benefit somebody to spend days or weeks or months with various people and just learn everything you can. Because in the beginning, I assisted one woman for like 5 years in addition to doing my own stuff. And I learned so much from her. And from her, she actually got me my first huge campaign, which was a Samsung campaign, because she was double booked. And I had worked with her so long and gained so much trust. When the client called her and wanted to book her, she said, I'm booked, but call Jackie. And that client, just like, she had such a reputation that there was no interview, there was no, let me look at your portfolio. I was hired because it's all who you know. So I think just diving in and doing it is going to be the most important thing.
That's a fantastic advice. Oh my goodness. And now I start to understand how much is included in your role. It's also leadership. You just talked about, you know, leadership role in your profession. Wow. Thank you. So I just watched the series called Lucifer, and there was one prevalent question right in this in the series. What is it that your heart desires?
That's a big question, but I have so many. I think it's like when I started my career, you don't know where you're going to land, and you keep figuring it out. So I think at this point, I would love to, as a stylist, get into licensing and branding and have my own line. I would love for that line to include corsets or lingerie and some lifestyle stuff. I think the other thing, my going back to my original dream of being a like Broadway costume designer. When I was 5 years old, my dream was to be Cher's costume designer. And it sounds funny now, but
it's funny. It's adorable. It's amazing because I also, Cher was such a figure in
the headpiece,
everything.
I was very loyal to Bob Mackie, but to be able to reach a level where I could design a tour of somebody of that caliber that is confident and is sexy and is kind of a trailblazer, and I could use all of my experience as a designer and as a stylist, and aesthetically, just that would define, like I could take everything that I am as a designer and put it onto a muse that is on stage. That would be magic for me.
Wow. Well, I wish you to make this dream come true, because you have to dream big in order to I don't know, progress, I guess, right?
You do, and you never know. And I think if I hadn't started in design, I wouldn't be a stylist. And one thing leads to another. And in 2012, the Blue Man Group reached out to me, and they said, you know what, you design sexy, you design rock and roll. We want you to design our show. And I feel like being known as a designer that stands for something and you have a point of view is not only important, but that's what is going to get you places. Because otherwise, if you're just everything to everybody, you're a dime a dozen. But I want my point of view to be something that, somebody like Cher or Dolly Parton or Lady Gaga or, can put out there and just be so powerful.
Share a little bit about your point of view. What is it? What do you feel like? Who are you? And I guess it's.
My point of view as a designer is I've always designed for really powerful, trailblazing women, and for me, that was why I designed that line of corsets. The corsets were not necessarily lingerie; they were meant to be worn as outerwear. And this was at the start of that trend of lingerie being worn as outerwear. This was 2004, before it hit really big. And before corsets were kind of everywhere being worn as outerwear. But I had always looked at that as like armor. And but not armor to necessarily protect, but just to exude power. So I think everything that I do as a designer, I can design anything. I mean, that's part of the magic of a stylist. If somebody wants me to style light, flowery dresses, romping through a field, amazing. But if you'd say, Jackie, do whatever you want to do, there's going to be this level of sexiness, in power, in femininity, in definitely walking the line of it's all very classy and tasteful. And it's a fine line, but I think that's where I stand, is kind of the woman that can do it all and show that she's like this sexual powerhouse.
Amazing. Wow, this is, oh my God, thank you so much for this conversation. There's so much depth to it. And it's just like you opened, kind of gave me a glimpse and our viewers to this fantastically creative world that many people don't think about and maybe don't know about, but it's so necessary to have this creative mind like yours to be present at any creative project, really. Is it?
Yeah. I wish when I started my journey there were these sort of talks where I could listen to, and people that would be very honest about the career and how they got where they got in an honest way that was attainable, not just a pie in the sky and, oh, I met this famous person, like, but just like a step by step of it's very attainable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Very honest, very needed conversation, and you've touched upon so many things in the industry that I think everyone who's trying to enter fashion industry has to know about. I'm eternally grateful. Thank you so much, and it was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And I wish you, wish you so much luck, and I hope you will make your dream come true. I see it.
When that happens.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks,